A woman agrees to let her incarcerated boyfriend spend time with his teacher. However, when the man develops a dangerous fixation on the college professor, the lives of both women spiral into chaos. One night in Corpus Christi, Texas, aspiring hip-hop artist Candy is busy performing music when the strikingly attractive Joe Dial emerges from the crowd and hands her a bouquet of roses. They soon make passionate love at her apartment and eventually get into a relationship. However, while she sings at a club one evening, two policemen unexpectedly nab her boyfriend. By the time she finishes her performance and steps out into the streets, it's already too late. The patrol cars drive away with her lover, leaving her in complete shock. At the Nueces County State Penitentiary, all the inmates are let out of their cells for recreation. When a bigoted convict named Collins starts beating the felon Rayette in the yard, Joe stops him from hurting the helpless man further. That night, Dr. Elaine Patterson and her colleague Kate Miller celebrate the launching of her book at a restaurant. The woman informs her she'll be promoted to head of the literary department at Corpus Christi State University this coming semester. At first, the college professor is thrilled with the news, but when her friend says she needs to launch a literature program for prisoners, she grows apprehensive and worries for her safety. Eventually, the promise of becoming the youngest dean in one of America's most prominent universities convinces her to push through in spite of the risks. At school the next day, Elaine is on the way to her new office when fellow professor James Evans invites her out to dinner. She kindly refuses his advances and implies her schedule won't allow her to date, but the charming man tells her he'll keep trying. The teacher meets with the warden later that same day at the prison to start the educational program. Before she leaves his office, he warns her not to trust the criminals or get involved in their personal lives, and to keep her distance from these dangerous men. Officer McBride accompanies her shortly and leads her through a hallway lined with inmates whose unsettling stares make her feel uncomfortable. He takes the woman into a large room designed for the prison reform program, where several students wait in their seats. Elaine introduces herself and explains that she's there to teach them English literature. Then, the prisoners take turns stating their names or the crimes they've committed. Rayette is excited to be in her class and recites a line from Romeo and Juliet. As he shows off his passion for the subject, she gets distracted when she notices the stunning man behind him. The college professor initially looks away, but when she can't help herself any longer, she gazes at Joe, and their eyes lock with intense attraction for one another. Once the Shakespeare-loving inmate finishes his speech, Elaine coyly asks the handsome student to introduce himself. He answers, but when she inquires what he's doing in jail, he goes quiet all of a sudden. Collins speaks on his behalf and discloses that he faces serious charges for a violent crime. She then shifts her attention to the other convict, who shares his name and owns up to strangling his wife after he caught her cheating. He threatens Elaine that she reminds him of his late wife, but Joe comes to her rescue and shames him as someone who enjoys hurting people. The woman redirects the scuffle to an assignment and requests the students to write a report on any book by Charles Dickens or Mark Twain. She encourages them to find something they can relate to in the story, such as thoughts or feelings they don't usually talk about to others. Before departing, the teacher probes the good-looking prisoner to see if he's ready to unveil his deepest secrets. He doesn't answer, and challenges her with the same question, though she refuses to play his game. Elaine records a diary entry on her computer that night, and writes that she finds Joe vexing. Later, as she relaxes on a deck overlooking a bay, James interrupts her peace when he shows up announced on a motorboat with his dog. The male professor seems surprised they're neighbors, but she doesn't buy it, so he confesses that Kate gave him her address. He teases her into inviting him in for coffee, but she coldly refuses and enters her home. At the state penitentiary the next day, the teacher notices that Joe isn't in class, so she confronts him about his absence after the lecture. The man explains he had to see his lawyer, but that he did his homework, just as she asked. The man says he can relate to Huckleberry Finn and his journey on the Mississippi, but unlike the protagonist, he keeps on floating down the river no matter how hard he tries to get ashore. When Elaine asks about the character's abusive father, his expression changes. Rather than acknowledge his feelings, he shifts the topic and shares the real reason he's taking up literature. He admits that he came across her book at the prison library, where he saw her picture, and that he's been wanting to get close to her ever since. Now that the gorgeous lady is in front of him, he tells her he can see through her pain. The woman laughs nervously and jokes that everyone is suffering. It's just that women can handle emotions better. Joe doesn't take kindly to her statement and grabs her pearl brooch. He pierces his arm with its sharp pin and forces her to take back what she said about the pain between them. Elaine adamantly refutes his claim that she's talking about them, though he continues hurting himself, causing her to give in to his request. She immediately walks toward the unpredictable felon and asks for her trinket, but before he returns it, he passes on a letter and instructs her to read it when she gets home. The professor meets up with Kate that afternoon to play racquetball. Her colleague notices she's stressed and confronts her about it when they spend time in the sauna. Elaine confides to her friend and reads Joe's romantic note, where he reveals that he wants to be alone with her in a room and have an intimate moment, so she'll know that he loves her. During class the following day, the teacher announces she's giving most of the prisoners a passing grade for their report. She then approaches her favorite student, rips out the letter she wrote him, and hands it over. The love-struck inmate pieces together the torn paper in his cell and discovers that the woman is playing hard to get. In her note, she says that if he wants them to make love, he has to understand her innermost desires. That evening, Elaine lies on the living room floor in her nightgown. Lost in her thoughts, she fantasizes about being with someone. The next day, while in class, the professor instructs her students to write their own stories and use symbols to hide emotions they want to get off their chest. She urges Joe to finish the story she's creating on a river and asks what's stopping him from reaching the shores. Angered by her goading, he slams his chair and walks out of the room. As the teacher walks through the penitentiary halls later to head home, he grabs her from behind and pulls her into the storage room, then closes the door behind them. She shakes in fear and tries desperately to loosen his tight grip on her face, but he continues to stifle the terrified woman's screams. He says he doesn't like it when people control him, so when she gestures that she won't do it again, he releases her. Elaine begs Joe to let her out, but he tells her to first admit she's been wanting to make love with him ever since their eyes met. She stays silent about her feelings and instead encourages him to open up. So he reveals that his dad hurt him and pushed his mom to take her life. Unable to resist the temptation any longer, he draws closer to her and starts to caress her face. He leans in, and they kiss passionately. Suddenly, the man withdraws and stops the moment, whispering they need to wait some more. He leaves her alone and frustrated in the room, still hungry for his warm touch and soft lips. That night, Candy pulls up on Elaine's driveway and angrily hurls a bag at her front door. She yells out to the upstairs window that Joe sent her, and she's letting her sleep with him one time. The college professor looks out the window and sees the hip-hop artist, who briefly glances back at her before she drives away. She soon discovers that the bag contains her clothes, an identification card for conjugal visits, a wig that matches the girlfriend's hair, and a bright red lipstick that she tries in front of the mirror. Elaine arrives at the Nueces County State Penitentiary the following day, aboard a bus while disguised as Candy. She passes through the inspection undetected, and the police lead her into a dim room with a bed. Now that they're finally alone, the teacher drops her wig on the floor, and Joe walks out of the shower, still dripping. The beautiful woman smiles seductively at him as he walks towards her. He carefully wipes the lipstick off her lips with a towel and removes her jacket, then leans in to kiss her neck and shoulders. However, after their lovemaking, Elaine stands motionless in the shower, seemingly regretting her decision. Joe calls her home that night and leaves a message as she lies frozen in her bed. He says he enjoyed their time together and wants to see her again on the next conjugal visit. The author eventually attends a party with her colleagues to celebrate her promotion as the new dean of their school's literary department. Following the announcement, she anxiously searches the crowd and realizes Candy is watching her from a distance, though she disappears. She returns to her house later, feeling uneasy, when someone starts playing music. As she discovers the boombox in her living room, the woman from the party pounces at her from behind and pushes her to the sofa. Joe's girlfriend takes out a pocket knife, furious that Elaine didn't return her clothes as she had asked, which implies that she's planning to meet him again. The crazed woman stabs a throw pillow to scare her off, then reminds her of their initial agreement that she was only supposed to see him one time. While the teacher gasps and shakes in fear, Candy sits beside her and explains that her boyfriend is a madman and that he uses people. However, because she understands his pain, she believes they belong to each other. The hip-hop artist leaves the mistress unharmed and walks away with her bag and music player. But Elaine receives another message from Joe the next evening on her answering machine. The obsessed convict expects to see her in 41 hours so they can become one again. Joe is annoyed when his girlfriend shows up for conjugal visits that weekend and sends the box of cookies she baked for him flying. An argument breaks out between them, and as they're fighting, the woman succumbs to her emotions and begs him to make love to her. Her boyfriend thinks she's pathetic, while Candy thinks he's crazy for believing that the teacher can love him as deeply as she does. Convinced of the teacher's affection for him, he walks away and returns to his cell. Unfortunately, the following morning, he finds out that a new professor is replacing Elaine, and that he must report to the warden, who already knows of his relationship with the teacher. While his eyes fill with restrained rage, he doesn't utter a single word as the superintendent strips his rights as a trusted inmate and restricts his movement in prison. When the officer instructs him to repair his cordless drill, the felon turns the power tool into a lethal weapon and uses it against him while he's busy on the phone. Joe disguises himself as the warden later that evening and escapes when an unsuspecting cop wheels him out of the office and drives him out of prison. McBride soon finds his superior's lifeless body in a cupboard with a bloody inscription that reads, "We are one." Detectives Pearl, Mutter, and Pierce show up at Elaine's doorstep the next day to disclose the recent turn of events. When questioned about the prisoner's cryptic message, she pretends not to know anything, but they aren't convinced by her answer. Before leaving, the older investigator warns her that Joe is an unpredictable psychopath who's capable of murder, and that she should call him if he reaches out to her. That night, Candy notices a vehicle tailing her while she's driving home and realizes her boyfriend is in the trunk. She says she knows about the words he wrote on the wall and threatens to report him to authorities if he wants to become one with his mistress. He appeases the hip-hop artist by telling her she's the only one he loves and asks to be taken to Jim's garage. She obliges and drops her car off, then picks it up the next day. As his girlfriend drives through the highway, she excitedly talks to Joe about her plans and how they'll reach for their dreams together, thinking he's still hiding in the cargo. However, when the police intercept her, she learns he's no longer there. Meanwhile, Elaine is upset that the escaped convict left her a message at work, so she buys a handgun for safety. She then heads home and discovers she isn't alone after seeing rose petals scattered on her bed to form her and her lover's name. Terrified, the professor grabs her firearm and frantically searches her house. The heartbroken man comes up from behind and screams, causing her to turn around and aim at him. Joe continues to move forward despite her warnings that she'll kill him, forcing her against the wall. She lowers her weapon and tearfully begs him to walk away, but he confronts her instead about how she really feels. Unable to speak, the woman shakes her head, but when he caresses her face and starts kissing her, the man can tell from her reaction that she still wants him. He then takes the gun away and delicately touches Elaine's hand, saying she'll profess her love, and they'll see each other again. After he leaves, the woman seeks help from James and the two detectives, who suggest she should stay with her neighbor. Pearl sets up an entrapment at the English teacher's house, believing the prisoner will be back, given his obsessive tendencies. Eventually, someone shows up with a box of roses while Joe emerges from the waters and watches police apprehend the innocent delivery man he sent. The inmate is disappointed that his love is working with cops and conspires with Candy to help him get his revenge. He manipulates her into thinking he's doing it for their relationship, so she calls the mistress's office. As soon as her boyfriend figures out where Elaine's hiding, he grabs a page from the phone book and walks out. She asks where he's going, but he grins widely and breaks up with her. Later that day, the professor returns to her colleague's home and is shocked to find toppled furniture and graffiti on the floor. Then she witnesses Joe hanging from the upstairs banister, causing her to flee in panic. Within moments, James arrives and walks around the living room to investigate, but the hanged man is nowhere to be seen. However, when he bends down to pick up the author's book, the escaped convict suddenly appears from behind and stabs him. Elaine screams and shakes in horror, then curls to the ground as she watches the crazed man reach his breaking point and reveal the emotions he's been bottling up ever since he was a boy. The inmate sobs uncontrollably as he talks to his mother, who isn't there in the room, hurt by her betrayal and for leaving him alone. Next, he grabs James and shakes him, speaking to him as if he were his father and threatening him not to hurt his mom. Joe recovers briefly from his imaginative mind and commands the teacher to sit on a chair and pretend as his mother, who's coaxing him to come near. He eventually approaches her and drops to his knees, pleading with her to play along with his request. The woman looks into his eyes and utters his mom's comforting words, driving the broken man to tears and to embrace her tightly. He meets her gaze and says he loves her while she stares back with disgust, though he doesn't notice and hugs her again. When he asks her to reciprocate his feelings, she tells him she doesn't love him. Stunned by her rejection, he pulls away and stands up while she continues screaming the truth in his face. As Joe is standing, Someone unexpectedly shoots him in the back, and as he turns, he sees Candy holding a gun. He soon drops to the ground, and while his girlfriend tells him she loves him, Elaine is relieved that her nightmare is finally over. Sometime later, the teacher visits the hip-hop artist in her apartment to comfort her. The women reflect on their experiences and believe they'll get through the pain and learn from it.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.